This will soon become your favorite committee to appear in front of,
It already is.
despite our reputation. All right, Senator Mohammed, why don't you go ahead? We have before us House File 4. So members, in your packet, you should have the most recent engrossment of House File 4, which was sent over to us from the House and got referred directly to the Judiciary Committee. And we'll take care of some technical stuff later, but first let's go ahead and ask Senator Mohammed to make your presentation. And I understand there are a couple of testifiers have signed up to present as well. So Senator Mohammed.
Thank you. Good morning. And is this still morning? Yes. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair Latz and members of the committee. You should have in front of you a copy of House File 4. This is the version of driver's licenses for all, which passed in the House earlier this week. First and foremost, this legislation is focused on improving public safety. Our roads will be safer when everyone has access to written and a driving test to make sure that they've shown the necessary skills in order to be able to drive. It will lead to fewer accidents and fewer hit and runs. It will lower insurance premiums for everyone. I'd like to take a note that this bill is supported by law enforcement, including the Chiefs of Police Association, MPPOA, and my office has also received letters of support from active duty law enforcement officials across the state of Minnesota. Members, these should be available in your packet today. In addition to being a public safety issue, this is also an economic issue. Our agriculture sector relies on the labor of undocumented Minnesotans who have a little to no access to public transportation in greater Minnesota. Business and farmers continue to deal with workforce shortages, and this bill could help address those shortages by giving undocumented Minnesotans the driver's license that they need in order to get to and from work. For the undocumented Minnesotans who will be able to obtain a driver's license as a result of this bill, it's an issue of basic human dignity. How are you supposed to get to work, take your kids to school, or attend your place of worship without being allowed to drive? The Coalition for Driver's Licenses for All has been asking us these questions for the last 20 years, and it is up to us to finally offer them a solution. I'm grateful to present this bill to the Judiciary Committee to discuss the data privacy provisions, which are more clear and robust than those in the version of the bill presented in the Transportation Committee earlier. Thank you, Senator Latz, for the conversation that helped led to some of the improvements in this bill. The bill today contains an important amendment offered by Representative Scott, which ensured continued data sharing between the Department of Public Safety and the Office of Secretary. This was a good amendment that improved the bill, and I'm grateful for the contribution. With these amendments, the data privacy provisions of the bill will accomplish these functions. Immigration documents and data will not be shared. Data provided to obtain or contained in a non-compliant driver's licenses will not be shared with any federal agency that enforces civil immigration law without a judicial warrant. DPS will be able to continue to share other data with other local, state, and federal agencies and with third-party entities, but those entities must certify that they will not share this data or this information with any federal agency that enforces civil immigration law without a judicial warrant. Additionally, these third parties must get the same certification from their customers, and there will be a penalty for any individual, agency, or entity that violates the limits on data sharing established in the bill. I believe these provisions strike an appropriate balance between protecting the privacy of Minnesotans while also ensuring ready access to necessary DPS information for law enforcement and other government agencies. And I will turn over to my co-author and also somebody who's led on this issue for the last 10 years, if that's okay, Chair Latt, Senator Bobby Joe Champion.
Senator Champion.
Thank you.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Long time no see. I haven't seen you in a while. Let me say that I am excited to be here to talk about this important work and driver's license for all. And I'm so thankful and grateful for the work that's being done by Senator Muhammad. It is true that I've been working on this for quite some time. And when she came in and got elected, she instantly said, hey, this is something I want to do, and I didn't want to stand in her way. And I looked for an opportunity for us to work together because we want to make sure that our folks have an opportunity to drive, go through the necessary paces so they can go to work and to their football games, to their doctor's appointments, whatever they need to do without the threat of anything else occurring. So this is important work, and I won't hold you long. I want to just be here, and I'm going to help answer questions because this is something that Senator Muhammad and I decided we were going to do together, and we are true partners because this mission, this work is important for us. And I also want to thank the folks who are here, and I know for me, Mariano and Giovanna, Javita and all the others, and I'm sure there are other partners too. I don't mean to leave any other partners out, but I know from day one when I started working on this important issue, they were there, and I just want to appreciate that as well. So thank you, Senator Muhammad, and thank you, Senator, you, Chair Latz, for all your work on this as well, because you did help me when I was doing it even back then. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Champion. I've been working on this since I was first elected to the House in 2003.
Yes.
So it's been a long road. All right. Are you Vina? How do you pronounce your last name, ma'am?
Iyer.
Iyer. Welcome to the committee. Go ahead and state your full name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Vina Iyer. I am the Executive Director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Senator Howe.
Before we get started, is it possible to have them walk, for those of us that have seen the Senate File 4, and now we're at House File 4, is it possible that somebody could walk us through the changes from Senate File 4 to House File 4 so we're more familiar with what we're looking at today?
Yeah, just so you know, it's a good point to make some housekeeping notes as well. We are going to recess from 11:30 until 12:30, so members have a chance to get some lunch. We only have two testifiers that I'm aware of on this bill, and they'll both be fairly short. It's in my intention to do exactly what you've requested, so that I think before we break for lunch, we should all have a full understanding of what's in the proposal before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Iyer, go ahead.
Thank you. Chair Latz, Lead Limmer is not there right now, President Champion, Senator Muhammad, and committee members. I'm Vina Iyer. I'm the Executive Director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, which is a legal services organization with Minnesota offices in Austin, Moorhead, St. Paul, and Worthington. We are committed to supporting immigrants on the pathway to citizenship through education, representation, and advocacy. ILCM is proud to support HF4 SF27, the restoration of driver's licenses for all, and is privileged to testify today regarding the data privacy and protection provisions of the bill, which are critical in this age of data sharing and mining. The main data privacy provision of this bill adds a subdivision 11 to section 171.12 of Minnesota statutes. It prohibits the sharing of data and documents relating to immigration status, but creates an exception with sharing documents with the Secretary of State in order to ensure the accuracy of the voter rolls, as was added through an amendment from Representative Scott in the House. Additionally, information cannot be shared for civil immigration purposes without a judicial warrant. In short, these provisions ensure that the routine act of applying for a driver's license does not open the door to deportation and family separation. We therefore urge this committee to vote in favor of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iyer. I'm also informed that Sergeant Sherry Falkowski is present to give testimony. Is Sergeant Falkowski here? Come on forward, man. Sergeant, go ahead and state your full name for the record and proceed.
Hi, my name is Sherry Falkowski. I've worked in law enforcement for over 25 years, and I work for the St. Paul Police Department currently. But as we talked about earlier, that this bill is supported by Minnesota police officers. This bill makes Minnesota roads safer. It allows people who want to be compliant the ability to do so. We in law enforcement have seen accidents because people didn't understand the rules of the road. This bill allows people the opportunity to learn. It educates more drivers. In law enforcement, when we have a picture ID, it makes our interaction simpler and quicker. It eliminates the need for officers to handle other identification items, such as passports, and it creates less exposure to us and stress on the individual. Let's make Minnesota roads safer together and pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. All right. Just want to call the members' attention to a number of letters that are in the committee packets as well from individuals and organizations that are supporting the bill. I'm not going to identify all of them verbally here, but I'll note that the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association is in here. Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association is here. Minnesota Department of Public Safety Driver and Vehicle Services Director, the Metro Transit Police Department, among others. So, and there are quite a few police departments with individual letters as well. And so I'll just call your attention in the Scott County Sheriff's Office, for example. So you can take a look through those as you wish, members. Let's see if there's anything else. Hospitality Minnesota. Also, their president and CEO, Liz Rammer, has submitted a letter in support of this as well. So with that said, I'm going to ask, I'm going to make a preface remark, and then I'm going to ask council to walk us through the bill. Article 2, which is the data portion of the bill, is the one that is primarily within our jurisdiction. It was amended substantially in the House after a collaboration between Representative Scott, a number of immigration attorneys, and just want to make sure I identify House Research, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, and the Secretary of State's office. So that was a rewrite of Article 2, and that is in the language that we have before us as part of House File 4. Council Primo, why don't you go ahead and walk us through the bill?
Mr. Chair and members, I will focus on the provisions that are within the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee. I will note that Article 1, which was heard in transportation, that is predominantly the same in both the House file and the Senate file. As Chair Latz stated, the changes are really in Article 2. The first piece within the jurisdiction of our committee is Article 1, Section 9. This prohibits a state agency or political subdivision from using the possession of a non-compliant license or ID card as evidence of a person's citizenship or lawful presence, or as a primary basis for investigation or detention. Then Article 2 begins on page 10. All of Article 2 is within this committee's jurisdiction, and this provides various data privacy classifications, protections, a certification process, and subjects certain entities to the penalties in Chapter 13. Section 1 is a conforming change to Chapter 13. Section 2 requires an independent audit of compliance with the certification requirement. The certification requirement is a piece from the House that was not included in the Senate file. Section 3 requires a certification of any disclosure of data that is currently authorized in current law. Moving to Section 4 on page 11.
This provides some clarity that the current mandatory disclosure of personal information related to the operation of a motor vehicle or to public safety does not include the immigration status data that is classified in Section 7. Section 5, which is at the bottom of page 11, also prohibits the Secretary of State from further disseminating data on individuals related to non-compliant licenses and IDs except to administer elections or to update voter addresses. And this is a piece that the testifiers have mentioned came from the House as well and was not included in the Senate file. Section 6, so Section 5 Section 5 on page 12 also includes a paragraph D that begins at line 11. And this is the piece that requires a certification that a person receiving the data will not use it for civil immigration enforcement purposes or disclose it to a state or federal entity that for those purposes, and subjects those entities subjects the data requester who violates the certification to civil liability and criminal penalties, which are found at current law in Chapter 13. Section 6 provides some clarifying language that current law disclosures do not include this immigration status data. And Section 7, which begins at the bottom of page 12, is really the main language that identifies and defines what the immigration status data is, and also classifies it as private data on individuals, and prohibits the dissemination of that data, except to and within the Department of Public Safety, the division, specifically to the division that administers driver licensing, and to the Secretary of State for purposes of improving the accuracy of voter registration records. There are also a few other provisions clarifying and prohibiting that any sharing of this data except pursuant to a valid search warrant or a court order. And violations are subject to Chapter 13 penalties and provisions. And if there are any other questions, I am happy to answer them. Thank you.
So members, this bill came to us from the House, but Senate File 27 had gone through the Senate Transportation Committee and been re-referred to Judiciary. There were 2 amendments that were added in the Senate Transportation Committee, which are not in the House file. So it is the desire of the Senate Transportation Committee Chair, Senator Dibble, and I understand that of the chief author of the bill, Senator Mohammed, that the changes added in the Senate Transportation Committee be honored and be added to the bill before us here today. And I understand Senator Howe has an amendment to accomplish that. Is that correct, Senator Howe?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And Senator Howe, you serve on both the Transportation Committee and, of course, here on Judiciary. So,
Yes, Chair Latz, I do. I have that.
congratulations.
That honor, yeah. So I thank you to both Senator Dibble, Chair Dibble, and Senator Mohammed that they were willing to allow us to insert these back into after they were agreed to. And actually, both amendments are included in the one amendment, the A1, Chair Latz. So I would move the A1.
Yeah, I was going to have you move it so we can actually distribute it to the members. All right, so while we're distributing it then, if there's anything further you'd like to address the content of the amendment, go ahead.
The amendment basically, it's on page 3, and what it does is instead of attesting to it, it declares it under the penalty of perjury, the applicant. So it's on page 3, line 17. And if I may. So it just makes it so instead of just attesting to it, make sure that they understand that they're declaring this, that they're a resident under the penalty of perjury. So it just makes it clear that the applicant knows what they're doing there. And then the other piece is it doesn't allow them to issue it's kind of belt and suspenders stuff, because you can't issue a commercial driver's license to someone that can't demonstrate citizenship or lawful permanent residency in the United States. So this just makes that clear to it's kind of belt and suspender. It's federal law. We're just putting it in the state law so people fully understand that. So
Senator Mohammed, your position on the amendment?
We adopt that amendment.
Any questions or discussion relating to the A1 amendment? Not seeing any. Senator Howe moves the A1 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. All right, to the bill. Is there any committee discussion relating to the bill? Senator
Mr.
Howe.
Chair, I have some concerns, and I know that I raised those in the Transportation Committee, but I've got some amendments that I'd like to offer, but I think I'll wait until after we come back, if that's appropriate. But I would ask if I could ask Senator, if she will yield for a question, I would like to ask Senator Mohammed a couple of questions as we move forward here, if that would be appropriate.
Sure, and Senator Howe, as a matter of just committee protocol, you don't need to request that they yield. You can just go ahead and direct your question to the chief author. Senator Howe.
So Senator Mohammed, back in transportation, I asked you if you had read, back in 2003 when this all occurred, the Department of Public Safety made the changes to our statute through rulemaking. And when they do that, they have to submit a statement of needs and reasonableness. And so otherwise known as a sonar. So my question to you is, I asked you at that time if you had, if to fully understand what we did back or what they did back then and make those changes, it's important for us to know why they made those changes. And I asked you if you had read that sonar. And I'll ask you here today, did you take the time to actually read that sonar to understand why they did what they did back in 2003?
Senator Mohammed.
Mr. Chair, Senator Howe, that's a good question. I had chance to take a look at it, but what I've been doing is actually talking to Senate counsel. I've been speaking to attorneys who've worked on this for a number of years and people who've been affected by this issue to understand how revoking this right has affected their lives.
Mr. Chair, follow up.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Well, and I'm gonna actually read part of these segments in page 2 of the sonar. It says, the state's licenses are gateway documents for establishing a legitimate identity and obtaining privileges normally reserved for citizens or permanent residents of Minnesota and the US. With state-issued identifications, people can open bank accounts, obtain credit cards, gain entry to government buildings and airports. And that is still current today. With a Minnesota license, people can obtain such privileges as state resident tuition reduction, health care, and other social service benefits, even resident hunting and fishing licenses. There's a number of states that once 9/11 happened, the 19 states decided to start changing and strengthening the driver's license requirements as they relate to residency, legal presence, and short-term admission requirements because of the threat of what happened in 9/11. Actions taken, the states that issue licenses, and many of us are still working towards this, but the states, they issued licenses, and so did we, instantly over the counter, are considering eliminating that practice and some already did so. That was back in 2003. In Pennsylvania, when they checked their driver's license, they found thousands of fraudulent Social Security numbers in the driver's license records. Since the national standard for identifications don't exist, they do exist now, but this will not meet those requirements. Licenses from other states aren't reliable proof of identity or legal presence. And what this stated was Minnesota can't return to a policy where the state relies on license reciprocity. That's a good question that's a good term for me to practice on, I guess. The reciprocity among the jurisdictions of Canada and US, and we still, unless you have a real ID or how come I'm drawing a blank? Enhanced ID, that's still current today. Members, the Federal Trade Commission reported that identity theft and fraud just in 2021 was 1.4 million. This bill actually relaxes the requirements, and I believe that is going to substantially increase in our state, because I believe, and I can't remember how many there were, I'll have to look that up, but there were a number of identity thefts in our state last year. My own bank account was affected. So I do believe that this is important work. I believe that folks should be able to get a driver's license, but I think that residency requirement is paramount. And the proof of that residency requirement has to be stiffer than checking a box. And we heard in the Transportation Committee that we believe that, well, things are different now than they were 20 years ago. But we heard from DPS, they don't have a process in place. They're working on it, but they do not have a process in place to check foreign documents at this time. And I will say that in 2022, just last year, 98 individuals on the terrorist watch list were apprehended at our southern border. Do you believe we got them all? I do not. those 19 terrorists that boarded our planes, boarded the planes and flew them into the trade center, had 30 state-issued driver's license and identification cards. I'm not opposed to giving driver's license out, but I do believe that our national security needs to be upheld. And I think that's paramount.
Senator Mohammed or Senator Champion?
Chair Latz, Senator Howe.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that. I think that you and I, Senator Howe, can both agree that protecting our country and our democracy is one of the most important things to do as Americans, especially as people who serve the public. And I agree with you on that. When it comes to the issue of folks doing identity theft, going into people's bank accounts, people who are citizens and non-citizens both do that. We have U.S. citizens who do that, who commit crimes, and that is why we have laws in place to ensure that we're protecting people, especially citizens, to ensure that doesn't happen. What this bill does is it allows people the right to be able to drive their families to work, to school. It allows these people to get to work. They're paying taxes and fees in our state, And the one thing that you and I can, as public servants, can do for the people behind us is give them back a privilege that they've always had. We're not relaxing the laws. There are laws in place if they commit crimes to ensure that they're held accountable to the extent of the law, and I'm committed to doing that. But I'm also committed to ensuring that people in our state feel safe, feel heard, and feel like that they're part of a society that takes care of them. And that is why I ran for office. And I know you shared a story when you were in transportation that talked about the fact that you care about the immigrants that are your constituents, documented and undocumented. And we have federal agencies that do national security and have laws in place to ensure that they're taking care of that. But we also have an obligation to take care of the people who are here, to give them the necessary things that they need to be able to take care of their loved ones.
Senator Champion.
Just briefly, Mr. Chair, what I will say is from 03 and today are different. Like, for example, we do have real ID. We do have enhanced driver's license that requires much more than just a mere driver's license in order to make sure that we know who's getting on those planes and those sort of things. We just don't want to conflate those two issues, because it is true that we have to make sure that the people behind us have an opportunity to drive. They go through the paces in order to demonstrate that and pay the fee. And I'm sure that we can talk a little more, but I'm going to have to go to a bill signing. And so I hope that we can pick up where we left off after the break.
So one other thing I'll just call to the members' attention. The Commissioner of Public Safety can suspend the driving privileges of someone who fraudulently uses a driver's license under Chapter 171.18 and can cancel it under 171.14. And also the Minnesota Driver and Vehicle Service Protocols requirements for getting a driver's license in Minnesota are far more robust than Pennsylvania had prior to 2001. And it includes multiple forms of identification. Even if you come in with an ID or a DL from another state, they don't just look at that and issue a Minnesota driver's license. There are multiple primary and secondary identification documents that are required before they will issue a DL in Minnesota. We can pick up this thread. Final thought, Senator Howe, before we go into recess.
Thank you, Senator Latz and Senator Mohammed and Senator Champion. I hope as we come back, and I share that, I hope that you'll take some of what I've got to offer, not to dissuade anything or prevent anyone, but maybe just to stiffen up a few things as we go forward. And hopefully the committee will look favorably on them. So
We
I
will
appreciate
consider every amendment that's offered. Senator Howe, we're going to recess until 12:30. Members, please be back here and prepared to start again at 12:30. The committee is now in recess.
Lo sentimos que no haya intérpretes el día de hoy. Llegaron más temprano, pero la primera parte del comité se alargó y empezó un poquito tarde el de las licencias de conducir. De todas maneras, muchas gracias. Regresaremos a las 12:30. Esténse pendientes de nuestras redes sociales. Síganos en Facebook, en Instagram y en YouTube. En YouTube también estamos transmitiendo estos enlaces desde el Capitolio allá en las Ciudades Gemelas, allá en St. Paul, en la capital. Regresamos a las 12. Los senadores tienen un recreo, un pequeño recreo, y después regresarán para el voto final. Bueno, eso fue todo, y nos vemos.